Ukraine remains braced for a potential war this Friday. Russia says it has no plans to invade, but it has been amassing troops at the Ukrainian border. US President Joe Biden has spoken to his Ukrainian counterpart and pledged US support for Ukraine. The White House says President Biden reaffirmed the readiness of the West to respond decisively if Russia invades Ukraine. Biden also addressed Ukraine's recent criticism over Washington's decision to evacuate some American citizens, saying the US embassy in Kiev remains open and fully operational. President Zelensky thanked Joe Biden on Twitter for the supply of weapons from the United States. US media reported a senior Ukrainian official claiming that Biden told Zelensky to prepare for impact and said that a Russian invasion was virtually certain. The White House, though, was quick to dismiss those claims. The US is calling for an open meeting of the UN Security Council on Monday to discuss the crisis. America has also urged China to use its influence with Russia and discourage an invasion.
That our messages to Beijing have been very clear. We are calling on Beijing to use its influence with Moscow to urge diplomacy, because if there is a conflict in Ukraine, it is not going to be good for China either. There will be a significant impact on the global economy. There'll be a significant impact in the energy sphere. And it will be all the harder for all of us to get back to what we should be doing, which is building back better.
Russia, for its part, says it doesn't want a war with Ukraine or with Western countries. Russia's received a US reply to a series of security demands that it had made. Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov says President Putin will now decide on Moscow's response to all of that.
Официальные запросы всем моим коллегам с прямым обращением официально объяснить, как они собираются выполнять в нынешних исторических условиях обязательства, под которыми их страны подписались на высшем уровне. Президент уже об этом сказал. Если наши попытки договориться о взаимоприемлемых принципах обеспечения безопасности в Европе не дадут результата, тогда мы будем принимать ответные меры.
Well, our correspondent Stuart Smith, who's in Moscow, has sent us this update from there.
Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov here in Russia. He's doing a round of interviews on radio stations after these responses from the US and NATO. He said if it's up to Russia, there will be no war, but it's up, but that there will be, but we will not allow our interests to be ignored. This is live coming in right now in Russia as the foreign minister does a round of radio interviews. So Russia not saying it's the end of diplomacy, but that it's not going to sit around either waiting, leaving it as things are. Now, the United States and NATO are also not just leaving it here. It is expected that the Russian Foreign Minister and the United States Secretary of State Antony Blinken will meet to discuss these proposals at least one more time. In the meantime, the Western NATO military alliance is moving troops east, and more are being put on standby because what the Western leaders are considering now is Russia said it was not willing to let this issue go, but at the same time has now been rebuffed. It's ruling out an invasion of Ukraine. It's ruling out attacking any other countries. So what will Russia do next with so few options available to it? Well, the United States is warning, and Ukraine is worried, that it will use other measures such as cyber attacks, using energy manipulation, or trying to destabilize Ukraine in other ways to try to get its demands secured.
Well, for the US perspective now, our correspondent Susan Tirani brings us that from New York.
The call between U.S. President Joe Biden and his Ukrainian counterpart, Volodymyr Zelensky, was focused on, quote, de-escalation and the continuation of military aid to Ukraine. That's according to the Ukrainian president. A readout from the White House noted that President Biden reaffirmed the readiness of the United States along with its allies and partners to respond decisively if Russia further invades Ukraine. That readout also continued by saying that the Biden administration is also exploring additional macroeconomic support to help Ukraine and its economy amidst a pressure resulting from Russia's military buildup. However, there may have been more to the conversation than both sides reported. While the conversation was a long one, immediately afterwards, a Ukrainian official speaking on condition of anonymity apparently told CNN that U.S. President Joe Biden told Zelensky that Russia will attack Ukraine in earnest once the ground freezes, and for Kiev to, quote, prepare for impact. This news and alleged report caused Washington to severely push back on those comments, saying that they are not true and that President Biden has often publicly said that Russia may or may not invade Ukraine and that nothing privately was said between the two sides in this regard during this conversation. Meanwhile, the United States has called on the United Nations Security Council on Monday to hold a meeting to discuss Russia's threat to Ukraine. Susan Tehrani reporting from New York for WION World is One.